So again, on page 485, it says, hiring new employees. In order for a business to succeed, it must have a sufficient number of personnel to make it run properly. Finding qualified individuals to perform a business's duties is an important function. In order to gain a competitive edge in today's marketplace, a company needs to hire people who will enhance its mission. So I know some of you that work at different places. Like for instance, I know a couple of you have worked or do still work at Subway or Gordman's or something else like that. They want you to be there. They need for you to be on time. They need you to be, obviously, in order to help their goal of profit. That should be the main goal. To fill openings in your business, you may recruit new employees. Recruiting is the act of soliciting qualified people to work for your company. And a lot of times in today's society, when we talk about recruiting, we're not necessarily talking about employees, but we can apply it to that. A lot of times when we hear the words recruiting, we may think of military, because they do have recruiters. That's what their job is for the military. And or another big business that's out there, which you probably don't even realize, is college sports. That's a big thing. Right now we have college coaches that come into our building all the time looking for, especially now because football signing day was within a week, they are looking for people to fill their roster. And just yesterday there was a guy from UND here. Okay, so that is one of the things where they recruit. And it's big money and big business. If you don't think it's big money, yesterday it was announced that the University of Michigan football team is going to Rome for spring football. They're going to Rome and practicing for 3 days over there and then flying back. That's 120 some football players plus all their coaching staff and everybody else. They have to fly over there for 3 days, or I think it's like 5 days when they go over there. Okay, that's a lot of money. All right, so it's big business, but they also bring in a lot of money. Okay. The cost of recruiting includes advertising fees, interviewing expenses, such as travel expenses, and hiring expenses, such as moving expenses. Okay, so when you recruit somebody. Another kind of scenario that happened, this was actually in my family. My dad, what he does is he's an orthopedic assistant, where he is the person that assists the physician in all surgeries dealing with hands and wrists. He is the best in the country at what he does. He's been the national president for 30 years. So he is the best. They tried to get him, and he lives in Grand Forks, and they tried to get him in a hospital in New York, where they were going to tell him that he only had to work 3 days a week or 4 days. They would fly him to and from there every day. They would put him up in an apartment every time, and his salary would be close to $400,000 a year because of what he does. And that's how bad they wanted him. They flew him out there to have him interview. They put him up in all this different stuff, and they wanted him there, but obviously he didn't take it only because he didn't want to be away from his family. Okay, that's another big thing. But all that recruiting stuff costs money. Who pays for it? The employer does. So your total recruiting costs are going to be equal to the advertising. Have you guys ever seen any jobs posted anywhere, like advertising space? Yeah. It's not just at job services or anything like that. They advertise all over the place. Okay, so any advertising expenses, plus any interviewing expenses. So for instance, in my dad's case, they needed to fly him out there, and they put him up in a hotel or two, or for a couple nights and whatnot. I think he was there for 2 or 3 days to meet with them and discuss. They paid for all that. They paid for him to be there. And then what you'd also have to do is any hiring expenses. Okay, a lot of times if you're really good at what you do, they will pay for you to be, when you get hired, sometimes they'll throw in, hey, you know what, we'll pay 10% down on the house for you. Is 10% a lot of money? Could be. Depends on how much the house is. Let's say it's $300,000. That's a $30,000 payment for you off of your house. That's the initial house payment or the initial down payment on it. So things like that will tend to add up. But all that stuff, it's going to be adding, and we might have to multiply in order to get that before we add them. Okay, travel expenses. Whether they fly you there or pay for your mileage to get there, that depends. But on page 486, number 1 says advertising expenses are $1,975. The interviewing expenses are $1,470 and $1,260. Now, the reason why there's two numbers there, let's say that I'm the employer and I'm bringing Brendan in and Natalie in. Natalie doesn't have to come from as far maybe, so that's why the difference in prices. Brendan maybe has to come from a different area of the country, so therefore his was $1,470, Natalie's was $1,260. Has nothing to do with anything like that, but it was the fact that it was probably a longer distance traveled. Okay, that's the reason why. Or maybe Natalie was able to not spend the night, okay, where Brendan had to for a flight or something like that. So then that's an extra expense. That's why a lot of differences happen. It's because of travel, usually. Then hiring expenses are $475, $8,600, and 6%, and this is where we have to do some multiplication, on a $190,250 home. Okay? The $8,600, for instance, a lot of times what they will say is that they will say things like, we ended up hiring Brandon for this position and he needed to move across the country in order to get there. So we are going to pay for him to move there. So that's an expense, $8,600, that he did not have to pay in order for him to move from Minot, for instance, to, I don't know, pick a place. Huh? Paris, or whatever, okay? So me, the employer, paid $8,600 to have all of his stuff shipped over there, okay? So the first thing that I need to know is, what's 6% of $190,250? How much? 11,415. Now that I have all those numbers, all I do is I add all those together. And how much money is that? 195?
Yeah.
Okay. And for that one position, for instance, let's say that I wanted to, it was a new computer programmer or something like that. Who knows what the position was? I brought 2 people in to interview, and in order to hire that one position, it cost me $25,195. Why, as an employer, do you put that much money out for people? You want a better person in your company. That's the reason. Okay? They want people that want to be there. They want people that aren't just going to do this for a couple weeks maybe and say, you know what, I don't like to do this, forget this, I'm going. They're willing to invest money in you in order to get you to come there. That's the reason. Number 2, advertising expenses are $2,180. Interviewing expenses are $2,590 and $1,355. Hiring expenses are $575. $7,450 and 6% of a $464,000 house. Okay? So what is 6% times 464,000? 27,840. So, for example, just so that you guys understand this, and this goes back to a little bit about first semester of consumer math. When we talk about a down payment on a house, typically speaking, you need to make a 10% down payment on a house. If your company is willing to invest 6% for you to get there, then that means you only have to come up with 4% of what you owe for that as compared to the full 10%. It's a lot of money, isn't it? Wouldn't you like to have a almost $28,000 amount just to pay for your house? It's a lot of money, isn't it? So how much is that total? Shouldn't be 97. Because there's just two fives. So that company alone spent almost $42,000 just for that one person. Okay? It's a lot of money. Some of these things that we're going to be talking about coming up here, there's a lot of money involved. One of the things that's coming up in about a week and a half, we're going to talk about later on when we talk about advertising expenses and how much money it costs to have Super Bowl ads. That's one of the assignments we have coming up. It's a lot of money. Number 3, advertising expenses are $3,295.50. Interviewing expenses are $1,545.62. $987.31. $365.12. and $2,214.79. Hiring expenses were $1,658.75, $3,254.81, and 4.75% of a $398,880 home. Whew. It's a lot for this one. Now, real quick, just so that you guys understand what's going to happen to some of you. When you're typing these numbers in, please be careful. Make sure you have your decimals in the proper spots. What happens if you misplace a decimal? Then you're completely off. So the first thing I need to know is, what's the 4.75% of that house? $18,946 and how many cents? 80. Now, total all those up together, and how much money are we talking about for hiring this one person? Kayla got $32,268.70, right? Is anybody else get that too? Okay, so just to make sure that that was what it works with, okay? What do you think? It's a lot of numbers to add. I get that. However, if you line up the decimal and make sure you type it in right, you should be okay. There should be only one real multiplication thing unless they say something else another percentage-wise. Okay? What do you think? Not too terrible? So, here's what you guys have for today. It starts on page 486 and goes to 488. We're doing 1 through 3, which we just got done doing, and then 6 through 9.